So let's talk about Japan. You've got this huge, multi-billion yen sex industry that's just out there in plain sight. But here's the kicker. Prostitution is actually illegal. So how on earth does that work? Well, it's this incredibly fascinating system, and it's all built on a super delicate balance between the law, the culture, and one very, very specific loophole.
Right, so this is the big question, isn't it? The law officially banned prostitution way back in 1956. And yet, you have this massive industry just thriving. I mean, if you've ever walked through a district like Shinjuku in Tokyo, you know it tells a completely different story. So to really get how this is even possible, we've got to dig into how the whole system is actually designed.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the legal stuff, the core contradiction. Then we'll dive into how businesses navigate this so-called gray zone. We'll look at the history, the people actually working in the industry, what their pay and risks are like. We'll also touch on the newer, unregulated parts of this economy. And then finally, we'll zoom out and try to make sense of what it all means for Japanese society as a whole. All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, the legal contradiction. And honestly, this is the absolute key. If you can wrap your head around this part, you'll unlock how the entire system manages to work. So the whole thing really comes down to the super precise wording of two different laws. On one hand, you've got the anti-prostitution law from 1956, and it's very, very specific. It bans paid sexual intercourse, just that one act. But then you have this other law, the Fueho, which is all about regulating businesses that offer sexual services that, well, don't involve intercourse. You see where this is going? It creates this massive, and you could say intentional, loophole.
And that loophole, that's what everyone calls the legal gray zone. It's a really important concept. The thinking isn't what's illegal, it's what isn't explicitly banned. And that space, that gray area, is exactly where this whole industry has built its empire. The logic is kind of simple, right? If the law doesn't specifically forbid it, then it's allowed. And if it's allowed, it can be regulated and taxed.
Okay, so that's the legal theory. But how does it actually play out on the street? Let's take a look at the different kinds of businesses that have sprung up to turn this gray zone into a real multi-billion yen industry. So here you can see just how creative these business models get. You've got places like Fashion Health and Pink Salons that are totally in the clear, legally speaking, because they only offer services that aren't penetrative. But then you get to the soaplands. Now, officially, these are just fancy bathhouses, but unofficially, everyone knows that intercourse often happens. The way they get around the law is with this little piece of theater. It's considered a private romance between the customer and the worker. It's a convenient fiction, right? It means the act itself isn't part of the business transaction, so it technically doesn't break the law. And this quote really just nails the whole concept. Sex acts are illegal, but sexual expression is legal. It's the perfect summary. Think about it. You can't pay for the final act of intercourse, but you can pay for pretty much everything else that leads up to it or surrounds it. So the industry isn't really built on breaking the law, it's built on expertly navigating its super specific language. Now, a system this complex didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's got deep roots in Japanese history, and you'll find it really concentrated in a few key places across the country. Yeah, you can trace this all the way back centuries to the old licensed districts, the yukaku. But the modern industry we're talking about, it was really born in 1958, right after that anti-prostitution law came into effect. And here's the thing. Instead of just vanishing, the industry got creative. It adapted. In the 70s and 80s, you saw new businesses like soaplands pop up. And today, it's still evolving with things like papakatsu that are organized on social media. The pattern is always the same. Adapt and stay inside that legal gray zone. And we're not talking about some hidden back alley industry here. Not at all. It's right out in the open, concentrated in Japan's most famous entertainment districts. Places like Shinjuku in Tokyo, Susukino up in Sapporo, or Nakasu in Fukuoka. In these areas, these businesses are a huge and very visible part of the local scene and economy. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the system, the laws, the business models, but a system is made of people, right? So let's shift gears and talk about the human side of all this. What's it actually like for the people working inside this really complex economy? Well, one of the biggest reasons people get into this work is, without a doubt, the money. Just look at this number, 100,000 yen.
That's what someone working in a top-tier soap land can potentially make in a single day. To put that in perspective, that's roughly $700. That kind of income is an incredibly powerful pull, offering a level of financial freedom that's just really hard to match in most other jobs.
So who are the people doing this work? You might think it's all women in their 20s, and yeah, they do make up the majority, about 55%. But it's definitely not just a young person's game. There's a really strong demand for workers in their 30s and 40s, and even a small but dedicated market for those 50 and older. It really just shows you the huge range of customer preferences out there. Of course, we have to talk about the risks. The work comes with serious health risks, no question about it, especially higher rates of STDs. But in response, the regulated side of the industry has put in place some surprisingly thorough safety nets. We're talking about things like mandatory and regular STD testing for workers, super strict policies on condom use, and in many places, you even need a health certificate to work. It's all about managing that risk in a business where, health and safety are absolutely everything. But here's the thing, that regulated world with its rules and health checks isn't the whole picture anymore. There's a whole other side to this, a newer, much less formal economy that's powered by technology and operates completely outside of that established system. This other side includes everything from what's called tachinbo, which are basically streetwalkers, to enjokosai, or compensated dating, which has been around since the 90s. But the big one today is papakatsu. You can think of it as sugar daddy arrangements. These are all set up through apps, and the deal is basically financial support in exchange for companionship. And the key word here is companionship. Whether or not sex is part of the deal is left totally ambiguous, and that ambiguity makes it almost impossible to regulate. And you can probably see the problem here, right? These are anonymous, one-on-one deals made online or on the street. So all of those health and safety rules we just talked about from the regulated businesses, they just don't apply. It creates this huge blind spot for public health and for law enforcement. So when you take all of this, the laws, the gray zones, the regulated businesses, the new unregulated stuff, and put it all together, you have to step back and ask a much bigger question. What is the actual role of this massive, complicated system in Japan today?
Well, depending on who you ask, the industry seems to serve a few different social functions, and they can even seem contradictory. For some clients, it's seen as a way to relieve stress or maybe find some kind of social connection they're missing. And for a lot of the workers, it's a very real, though obviously controversial, economic choice, a path to making a living and having financial independence.
But the views on this are really, really divided. If you look at it from the outside internationally, people sometimes see it as just another form of legal entertainment in Japan. But at the same time, it gets a lot of scrutiny, especially around issues of human trafficking and visas. And then within Japan itself, it's just as complex. You have this deep-seated social stigma that still exists, butting up against a growing movement from groups like SWASH, who are fighting to have sex work recognized as a real job, with all the rights and protections that come with that. And that brings us right back to where we began. This whole system is like a delicate dance between the letter of the law and the reality on the ground, a balance Japan has somehow managed to maintain for more than 60 years. But now, with the explosion of anonymous apps and social norms that are constantly changing, you have to wonder, how much longer can this strange, delicate paradox actually hold up?